is very challenging and also rewarding at the same time. We're going to give you a brief snippet of cognitive coaching. Cognitive coaching is an 8-day training, and we have an hour and a half. So you can imagine how condensed this is going to be. But we're going to give you a little bit of a flavor. In the Toronto District School Board, under Jim's guidance, we have chosen cognitive coaching as the coaching method that we use with our mentor coaches, our beginning teacher coaches, our literacy coaches are also trained in cognitive coaching, as are our student success leaders in the Toronto District School Board and our guidance resource teachers. So we're spreading it across the system. So a lot of the people who support beginning teachers are familiar with this model of coaching. So we're going to start by having you do some reflection, and I invite you to turn to the last page in your package. The first question, I'd like you to just take a couple of minutes and jot down some of your thoughts. As an experienced teacher mentor, what are some behaviors, skills, or approaches you might use to support and extend the thinking of a teacher with whom you are working? So if you would just take a minute or so and jot down your personal thoughts. We're going to give you opportunities to chat this morning, and we're going to use this as the signal to bring you back. These are Tibetan chimes, and apparently if you bing them once, it means your community needs you. Twice, go away and meditate. So we're gonna so I've practiced, and I can now bing them once successfully. So I'd like you now just to share at your tables and listen for some of the commonalities in your responses to that question. Just another 2 minutes. Thank you. The use of the words in that question, support and extend, were used intentionally. There are specific behaviors that are all part of the cognitive coaching approach that help teachers, help to support and extend teachers' thinking. And underlying that are many assumptions and presuppositions. So Denise is going to talk about those now.
Thank you. In your handout, if you look on the page that talks about some of the suppositions, presuppositions, or propositions that underlie cognitive coaching. One of the authors of the cognitive coaching model is a fellow named Art Costa. And Art's work, going way back to a book that he wrote called School is a Home for the Mind, really was very influential in my thinking about working with students. And I've had a chance to hear Art present a number of times at conferences. And twice I've heard him share this information with a room full of educators. And Art talks about the fact that one of the things that distinguishes a profession is the fact that in professions, people grow cognitively over the span of their career. And so if you were to give an IQ test, for example, to somebody at the beginning of their career, and then at the end of their career, you would find that they had actually grown intellectually over the span of their career. So that's true of a profession with one exception. There is one profession for which that is not true. I don't usually mention this in audiences other than teachers, because it is teaching is the profession for which that is not true. So, of course, people want to find out, this seems counterintuitive, all right, that people who would devote their life to education would be stupider at the end of it than when they began. So trying to identify why is that? What is the difference, between being a brain surgeon and a classroom teacher? So what they discovered was that there are two factors that contribute to that loss of capacity. And when you ask this of teachers, usually they can identify pretty quickly for you what those two factors are. The first one is isolation. It's working alone. A doctor goes into an operating room with a team. and there's opportunity for professional conversation. So that whole idea of learning as you work, lawyers work in teams and have paraprofessionals who support their work. So it's this isolation among teachers. And the second factor that contributes to that is the lack of time built into our day for reflection. And you heard those beginning teachers on that tape talking about the relentless pace of their day. And they arrive, running at the beginning of the day, and they talked about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. They're still going with the doing and the planning. Where is the time built into the day for reflection and for conversation and dialogue with colleagues? So this model of cognitive coaching is about trying to mitigate some of those factors in the life of a teacher so that people do have the opportunity to develop intellectual capacity over the span of their careers. So that's some of the presuppositions. This is really annoying. Around cognitive coaching, that humans, including teachers, continue to grow cognitively given the right conditions and support is one of the presuppositions. It's also based on a belief that in order to change behavior or practice, something has to happen intellectually first, that a cognitive shift is a prerequisite for changing behavior. And yet so much of our professional development for teachers is really based on trying to change people's behavior without thinking about the thinking that needs to go along with those shifts. The model is also based on a belief that teaching is constant decision making, and that one of the things that people develop as part of their expertise is the ability to think on their feet. And I remember Barry Bennett talking about one of the things that he's noticed about beginning teachers who get into difficulty very early. It's their inability to anticipate what might happen. It's like they've never seen a kid before, right? And every behavior, is a constant surprise to them, that kids do the things that they do. Whereas, beginning teachers who kind of come in with that ability to think like a kid and be able to anticipate what might go wrong and think about things like, how do you get kids to transition from one activity to another, and introduce procedures and protocols that help things go smoothly. It's that ability to think in that way and to make decisions in the moment that is a survival thing for beginning teachers to learn. And so this model is based on the belief that teachers need to be able to think on their feet, and that helping them to develop that capacity to anticipate and to be responsive in the moment is what's going to contribute to their success as teachers. And so if you can't buy into that kind of belief system, then cognitive coaching may not make sense to you. But if that resonates with you as being common sense, then I think you'll find that cognitive coaching is a model that really supports that whole concept. So you've on the page there about the mission of cognitive coaching then is to support self-directedness. It's based on a belief that even a beginning teacher needs to be the expert in his or her classroom, that they are the one who needs to feel competent and confident and have the expertise, that you may have 15 years or 20 years of teaching, but their context is not your context, and they are the ones that know their kids, that know their curriculum. They need to be aware of the various factors that are there, and they need to be the ones who feel like they are the expert in their own situation. It's also based on the belief that for teachers to grow intellectually, this is not something that they do autonomously, but they also need to grow in their ability to interact professionally with other teachers and to see the value of collaboration and to see themselves as part of a larger community. So just a little buzz about that. How does that fit with your understanding of what it is that we need to do to support beginning teachers? How does that resonate with what you're doing to support teachers in their career? So just a little buzz about that. Thank you. As part of the training in cognitive coaching, we work on the coach's skills in observation and data collection. And one of the things that a coach can do for a person is to gather data for them, which they can then use to enhance their own reflection. So we're going to give you a little opportunity to practice doing some data collection. So Penny and I are going to do a demonstration of a coaching conversation. So Penny is going to be the speaker, coachee. I'm going to coach her. I have no idea what Penny is going to say. This is not scripted. This is in the moment. All right? So some of the opportunities for coaching, when coaching is appropriate, when someone is planning something, a coaching conversation can almost be like a dress rehearsal for what they're going to do. So having the opportunity to walk through a coaching conversation when you're planning something enhances the likelihood that it's going to go well. Right? When people are reflecting on something that they've done, that's another time when a coaching conversation can really help people to be more analytical about not only what they did, but why they did it and what the impact of their decisions were, and how they could then apply that learning in another context. So reflection is an opportunity for coaching. And the third time is that when people are stuck, when they have a problem, when they're feeling a sense of, resourcelessness, they're feeling tapped out, they've done everything that they can do, and they're really, having difficulty because they're stuck and they're kind of becoming inflexible in their thinking. That's another opportunity where a coaching conversation can really help to get people back up to that kind of capacity of being resourceful. So Penny and I are going to model for you the first of those conversations, a planning conversation. Okay? So we have you kind of sitting in groups of 4, and we'd like you to, each person in that group, to focus on something different in the conversation. So 2 of you are going to focus on Penny. 1 of you is going to listen for her language. And what you're listening for is the language of thought. So you're listening for kind of key words or marker words that give insights into how Penny is thinking as the conversation goes along. Okay? The second person is going to be observing Penny's body language and really focusing on the nonverbals. So you're going to be watching her face, her eye movements, her posture, her gestures, and really writing down observations of what it is that you're seeing. Okay. The other 2 folks in the group are going to focus on me in the coach's chair. And again, 1 of you is going to be scripting, if you can, some of the words that I'm using. If I ask a question, to try and get maybe the first couple of words of the question. So you're listening for what is the nature of the language that the coach is using. And the second person, again, is observing the nonverbals. Again, so you're watching for posture, gesture, breathing, eye movements, all of those things. Now, you may actually have to get up and kind of move yourselves around because we're going to be sitting in these 2 chairs. So if you need to shift in order to, so if you're going to be sitting here.
You're going to sit.
Okay, so I'm going to be sitting here. So if you need to shift over here a little bit so that you can see better, go ahead. This is only going to be for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. People who are watching Penny, if you need to switch chairs so you can see her, organize yourselves and figure out who's watching for what. All right. Okay. So, Penny, what's up?
Well, I've been working with one of the secondary schools in the East End for about a year, and we're bringing the whole staff together on December 8th, and I have a whole day to work with them, and I'm working with the curriculum leaders on Monday, and we're trying to give them some tools to work with the data from their students. And so on Monday, I'm giving the curriculum leaders some tools that they're going to use with their departments. What I do with them, my colleague and I do with them on Monday is a modeling of what we hope they will then do with their departments.
Right.
And then on the 8th, the whole school will be together, and we're hoping to move forward from there with what's already happened in the departments.
So this has been a bit of a journey with you with this particular secondary staff over a year, and coming up to a really big event in December where some actual student achievement or student data is coming on the table. And there's some steps that need to happen for that day to be a good one with the staff.
Yeah.
So you have this opportunity to work with curriculum leaders on Monday, and really thinking about that as an opportunity to prepare them well for their department interaction and actually model for them what you want them to do.
Yeah. And we've decided to focus just on the grade 9 and 10 data so that everybody will be included. We were going to originally use just the grade 9s, but with the 10s as well, then we include the history and career studies. And
so you're really planning two things. There's this December event with the whole staff, but then there's also this preliminary activity with the curriculum leaders. Which one of those might you want to talk about right now?
I've got the 8th, or the Monday.
Yeah.
This is Friday, so I have Monday all figured out.
That's reassuring, yes.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
So it's the 8th that I'm still not sure about. I've got all these pieces, and I'm trying to figure out what to use and how to get them moving. I'm thinking between now and then, the departments will have made some predictions about the student achievement in their subject areas. And I'm hoping they're going to come with that on the 8th.
Right.
I'm hoping by the end of the day to have them in professional learning communities in their departments, really focusing on curriculum and using the DeFore model and sort of working with the first question. Okay, so they've had the data, they've looked at it. Now, what is it we need to do in terms of our curriculum to have more students successful?
You've mentioned a couple of times the word moving, that this day is a day for creating momentum for the department. So as you're thinking about that day, it's now about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What might you be looking for that would be evidence that there's energy and momentum that would sustain what you do on that day?
That they're talking to each other, that they're focused on something, that they've had dialogue and maybe some decisions are starting to be made. Another piece of the day too is to continue to build community on the staff as well.
Right. So those conversations, those focused conversations about data, about kids, hearing that would be important to you. Right. And this collaboration, what might be evidence of that people have come closer together?
So when they're sitting at a table, they're all sitting focused, they're not, there aren't people sort of pulled back out of the circle or away from the table, that everybody's come together.
So you're actually looking for physical evidence of focus and interaction.
And then as I walk around, I'll be listening for. So hopefully by the end of the day, they will have made a beginning, a start. They do have scheduled time where they can continue this during their a time blocked off during the day. They won't get it all done that day, but at least a beginning, I'm hoping, by the end.
So as a skilled staff developer, as you're thinking about the choices that are there for you, what are some of the approaches that you're considering that will create that momentum and help to generate that focus?
There's an inclusion activity that I'm thinking about I'm planning this with a colleague, so I'm not doing it on my own, that will continue our journey in building community. And hopefully they will come with those predictions.
Right.
So then they can look at the real data and they can talk about what are they noticing and sort of following Bruce Wellman's model. And the ahas and things. So that's the what, the so what, and the now what almost as well.
Yeah.
And building in energizers, having some energizers ready to go in case I notice the energy or the focus going.
So you've made some decisions that community just doesn't happen, so you're consciously going to do some strategies that will help to build inclusion with them.
Another piece is we're out of the school, so there are no distractions.
Right.
So we've made that choice too.
Yeah.
And we're in a location that's not going to cost anything, so we can feed them well.
Oh, that's good.
I'm not paying, they are, but the school
So
is,
taking care of all those
Yeah,
creature
yeah,
comforts,
yeah,
creating
yeah.
the environment is
Yeah.
important. You're also going to be monitoring the energy level of the group during the day, and so if you feel like they need something to get them up and moving, you're going to do that. You're also, it's as if you're imagining graphic organizer or something that you're using that with that conversation so that there's something that keeps it focused.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think too, some accountability, because I think we'll maybe even take that all back to the school and have it posted in the staff room. So there's public accountability as well.
So the public recording of
Yeah.
what's happening that day and then having a place to put that up.
So they can continue those discussions
Right.
when they have their staff meetings. Yeah.
So as you're thinking about that day and you're very much focused on the learning for the staff and what you hope will come out of that for them, what might be the learning for you in working with them?
Whether this approach is really going to help them move along. It's a model that we're sort of playing with, and so I'll be really cognizant of that because other schools are asking to do what this school has done.
So this is a piloting for you, and you'll be looking for evidence that your planning was on board. So we've just been talking for a couple of minutes about this wonderful event coming up in December. So how might this conversation have been of help to you?
I think as I've thought about it more, I've got a picture now, and I can see the staff in the room, and I can see them working, and I'm hoping that's what's really going to happen.
Or you're going to rewind the tape.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I'm really going to think, okay, so how that picture I have at the end of the day, what really needs to be put in place so that there's success at the end of that day.
Yeah. So the little storyboard needs to be developed a bit more fully.
That's right, right, because the time is so precious, so it has to be really valuable.
Right. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so back with your group of 4.
So just to bump up your anxiety level a little bit, before you leave here today, you're each going to have a chance to sit in the coach's chair, just with one other person, and actually practice a coaching conversation. So let's focus first of all on Hank. So those of you who were watching and listening, first of all, let's think about verbally some of the things that you've heard her say.
Well, she said a couple of times that she was trying to do this, and that she was hoping and trying. And I felt for her. And and that moving forward. But then after near the end, she talked about energizers and keeping the group filled with energy. So I think there was a concern about this group that she was working with. And then, of course, accountability and how, there was going to be some judgment, probably. at the end of the meeting or workshop.
So initially, some kind of tentative language, not quite sure, hopeful, but, a little anxious about how this day was going to go. And what I'm hearing is a little bit more decisiveness or assurance about that this is going to go as planned. Okay, thank you. Anything else that anyone heard in her language? Thank you.
Just that it was very monotone. There wasn't really any passion about what she was doing. She was just fragmented. She talked about all of these pieces. So it was just as though she hadn't actually put the pieces together yet.
Right. Was that true throughout the conversation?
I think so. There were a couple of points where she almost had a spark, but it just seemed that there were so many pieces that she was trying to, get it all together, but she just couldn't, and just a lot of trailing off as she was speaking.
Okay, thank you. Someone about this?
I just heard her going through the thinking process of organization and overall of the two areas, the curriculum leaders and the staff. And then I heard her talking about the look-fors, the evidence as she's being guided, and then that evidence during the structure of the day and how it's going to go through. And finally talking about the visual picture that's beginning to form in her mind of the day progressing.
She talked about starting to get a picture. One of the things that I also noticed sitting in the coach's chair was that she interrupted herself a couple of times. That as she was going along one train of thought, something else kind of caught her by surprise. There's this other little piece as well. Okay. Those of you who were observing body language, what were you noticing in terms of posture, gesture, facial expression, and like that? What were you seeing?
A nice necklace.
That could be potentially distracting, but I try not to focus.
The body language seemed to be reflective of how comfortable she was with the thought she was making. That when she started out and she was thinking she was fairly confident about something, she was smiling, her eyes were looking up, she was thoughtfully going through the process. And then you would ask a question and she would have to really think that through a little tighter. And so then we got some raising of the eyebrows, we got a little bit of frowning, and then more hand gestures started to come in. Like she was reaffirming for herself as well as for you what she was really thinking. So it was almost like she was going from her broader pictures down to her tighter pictures of what was happening. And when she was in her more confident mode, she was using her feet more then. She was tapping her heels or tapping her toes. Do you know how you do that? Little fingers we all have. So her body language, in my mind, was very in tune to the way she was thinking.
That's why, one of the reasons why you want to have no obstruction when you're coaching someone, because as you noticed, lots of times there's a lot going on with your feet that may be telling a different story from what's going on up here. So that acuity of being able to get kind of a total impression of what it is that you're seeing, okay, is what you're looking for when you're sitting in that coaching chair. So hand gestures that reflected that as she was organizing things in her mind, you saw her physically positioning things that as she was getting clarity about them in her mind. Thank you.
Okay. Now, those of you who observed Denise in the coach's role, what are some of the verbals that you heard?
Well, I noticed, first of all, she did a lot of active listening where she didn't interrupt. She just listened very quietly, and then she would rephrase to make sure she understood what you were talking about. And she got you focused onto what were the two main things you were talking about. What were the two main problems? And she got to the heart of the matter.
and then ask you what was the most important to you to solve at that moment that you were having this discussion. You kept returning to that main issue and keeping focused on that original objective that you had. But what I noticed often is that you always started your question with a positive statement first, and then brought in the question. So you always said, as a skilled staff developer, then your question came. And that happened several times throughout. So those are the three things that I noticed.
Thank you. So paraphrasing for clarity, keeping me focused with questions, and using positive presuppositions. Thank you.
Also asked you to think about what evidence would show you that you were getting what you wanted.
So helping me create that picture.
Yeah, and she also shared the vision that she was getting of your day. So it wasn't just paraphrasing, it was also summarizing the vision and looking.
So paraphrasing, summarizing, clarifying.
I also like that she clarified the learning that it would bring for you. As a coach, she could have very clearly taken you through the steps to make sure the event was successful, but not brought that connection to you, and twice came back with different phrasings of how that could have meaning for you.
So personalized.
Just also clarifying what you wanted out of the conversation, because you said you have two things that you want to talk about. Which do you want to talk to me about now? Because that brought the conversation focusing on, as opposed to you could have just said, oh, how is Monday going to go? So also finding out what the person wants out of the conversation.
So what was important to me?
And I was wondering about the challenging part, like when she might say, what happens if they don't show up with the data? You know, like, and yet at the same time, because, you know, you have to be very careful, maybe not to challenge them.
There were two additional questions that I found really good. One was, as you think about that day, what might be learning for you? And then making it even more great, tell me even more. So you've been talking for a couple minutes, how does this conversation
So we're really bringing it back to me. So the focus is really on me. It's about me.
Just like that beginning teacher.
That's right. I know. I could identify with that. Did anybody notice a balance between questions and paraphrases? Did any? Anything stand out?
Much more paraphrasing at the beginning, and the questions became more frequent at the end.
So initially, a lot of paraphrasing, and then the carefully crafted questions.
I thought I heard a little bit of naming and framing within the responses, even though she was feeding back, maybe took the opportunity to name it and frame it so that maybe there was a bit of an aha for the person being coached as to, oh yeah, that's what I was thinking about. So I thought there was a very subtle bit of that.
So naming by thinking, labeling that. Hey, what about the nonverbals that you saw Denise use? Thank you.
I was looking at Denise and noticing that she had her hands on her knees and she was always nodding her head, which was a very positive thing, and great eye contact. I think you created that opportunity for the good eye contact. You also remained very calm. You smiled a lot. And I felt like you were really, I got feeling, oh wow, she's listening so well. Like I would have loved talking to you to see you look like a really good listener. Your hand movements were very positive hand movements. And I kept writing down, nodding again, smiling, hands on knees. But another thing I noticed is that sometimes when you were talking with me, you would actually lean forward toward her, which felt good to me, and that would make you feel like you were being a little warmer with her. And another thing I just have to point out that I think is very interesting is I was being so very conscientious about watching you, Denise, that I was hardly hearing the conversation. I was writing down all the things, so I was missing out on the conversation because I was so focusing on getting all those nonverbals. So that's just a point that happened for me that's like, oh yeah, I wasn't really listening to what you were saying because I'm going, good eye contact, remains calm. So I was writing frantically all the things that I saw, trying to be so focused on that I didn't hear much of the conversation.
So you noticed a lot of positive body language. That's the eye contact, leaning forward, staying calm.
Same, a lot, that's verbal, but you really said that a lot and it was great. So we'll talk later, I'd love to chat with you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I was just thinking, even the fact that you're sitting down, because a lot of these conversations kind of happen on the fly, you know, so if you're both standing, maybe the opportunity to head away or finish off early is there. Again, it's a quiet environment, but even the fact that you took the time to sit down is an indicator.
That's an example of formal coaching. On the chart on the back, when Denise talked about opportunities for coaching, there's formal and informal. This was a formal coaching conversation where we took the time to sit down and do that, but you can have coaching conversations on the fly in the office, at the mailboxes, wherever. Those are the more informal. Sometimes we'll say to each other, I need to be coached. I need you to coach me. So we will set aside time and sit down and do that, and that's much more fun. Anything else about her body language? Thank you.
I just noticed that when you were helping her to identify what the steps were, you were saying, okay, and number 1, and number 2, and then where are you going to go next? And so you were helping to sort of form that timeline and have a picture. And even when you were identifying that, perhaps you would use a graphic organizer or a box or something, that it was very visual, and then you could see the picture.
Yeah. What might be a reason you do that?
Well, I think it's because she could sense that you did not have yourself focused on what it was you were doing in the plant. You didn't have the graphic organizer in your head. She was putting it there for you.
And she knows I'm a visual person. So that was very intentional on her part to use visual. Question?
She might have also been slipping into a consulting role for 5 seconds. You know, instead of eliciting the best from you and helping you figure out for yourself where you want to be at the end of the day, based on the evidence you suggested, she slipped into a consulting role knowing your learning styles and so on.
I heard Penny, the reason I said the word graphic organizer was when she said, what, so what, now what? I was imagining, and she talked about having people chart and
use Bruce Wellman's work, which is that's the visual that I have in mind.
But you did preserve a coaching element by posing it as a question. That's the only thing that you did really that was, so it was that consult, putting a pretty fresh idea, but it was posed as a question, so you did lock Penny into having to say, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. But I wouldn't have used that if I hadn't heard her describing what I thought was graphic. I would have said, oh, so graphic organizers would be a great idea for capturing that information. You're right. If I had done that, I would no longer have been coaching.
I just want to go back for a minute to Denise's verbals, to the coach's verbals. At any point, did you notice her giving me suggestions or advice? Denise used to be my boss in staff development. And we've got a lot
Didn't
of...
I do a marvelous job?
She tried, sorry, let me rephrase that. She tried to be my boss. So we worked together a lot. So at any point, did you notice that she was giving me advice or suggestions? Right?
She always phrased it as what might. She provided a menu sometimes not, but it was always what might do, not what could you do.
So tentative language. Thank you.
Well, I was a little disappointed maybe because of the role of the coach, but you seemed sort of very uneasy about not too sure how that day was going to come together and what were they going to be doing at 2 o'clock. And I just felt that you seemed a little too calm and that you didn't seem to impassion her at all about what she was planning. You didn't really seem like you were going to attend. You know what I mean? You're throwing out some things to get that job done, but if part of the problem is that she's not excited about it, then maybe not for this particular situation, but for new teachers and coaches to share that passion or to be excited about what they're doing when you're part of the coaching role that they
Could be. Yeah. If concerned about that issue of energy and whatever, then I might very well have said to Penny, so how are you feeling about this thing? And asked her to talk about that. Again, that's a choice that the coach has. What is it that we're going to talk about in this conversation? And again, how do you decide? It's on the basis of what you think the person needs to be more. All right? I may think Penny needs to be more excited about this and that. All right? It's for Penny to decide if she needs to be, in order to do this well, does she need to generate her own energy? She's more concerned about the energy and their momentum. So just a couple of things. So in learning the coaching model, one of the reasons why we think the coaching model takes 8 days, we think it's about 7 days of unlearning and about 1 day of learning. Because so much of the typical things that we do in support of other people are just not part of coaching conversations. We call those coaching set-asides. So in order to sit in this coaching chair, there are some behaviors that you have to put on hold that are perfectly appropriate at other times. I mean, Penny asked you at the beginning about the repertoire that you have. A lot of that repertoire that you have right now is congruent with coaching. Some of it is not. And some of that you need to set aside. So one of the things that you might have noticed was that I asked Penny very little about the details of that day. Who's going to be there? Where's it going to be? Food. Oh, what are you serving?
What school is it?
Yeah, what school is it? Energize it. You know. So part of what you have to set aside is your own need to know. Penny is the one that needs to know about all the details of the event. I don't need to know. And before you ask a question, you always stop and think, for whom is this question of benefit? If it's just to satisfy my own curiosity and my need to know, I have to let that go. And so these conversations tend to be short and focused and quite efficient because we don't go into all the gory details of the who and the what or whatever. So somebody pointed out that it's getting to the heart of the matter. What is the issue that needs to be coached here? And you let go a lot of that other stuff. So that curiosity.
The two other set-asides are autobiographical and solution-focused. Denise has done many days like this. She would be, oh, well, when I did a day like that with a school, yada, 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 yada. So we use the acronym BYT, bite your tongue. Again, it's not about the coach, it's about the coachee. The other one is the solution. She didn't give me any solutions. She didn't tell me what strategies I might use. So two other big set-asides. And we, as experienced teachers in the role of mentor, we've been there often where the mentee has been. And but again, it's not about us, it's about them and their experience and their learning. There's three main types of coaching that we talk about. The first type is that one where you observe somebody's behavior and you then give them feedback on what's working, what's not working, and what they should do differently. And often that's our role. If we are an associate teacher, we tend to use that role with our student teachers. What they did, what worked well in the class, what didn't work, and next time you do this lesson, this is what you might do, or this is what you should do. The second type that we're most familiar with is that of sort of an Olympic coach, an athletic coach, where both the athlete and the coach know what the skills required are. And often the coach doesn't have the skill that the athlete has, but knows how to coach them. And they both know also that it has to be clear in their mind before their body will perform at that level. And at the last Olympics, there were far more sports psychologists there than actual athletic coaches, because so much of that is about the mind. The third type is this cognitive coaching that we're sharing with you now. And on the back we have, and in your package, I believe it's in your package as well, the metaphor we use for coaching is that of a stagecoach, something that will transport people from, or convey them from where they are now to where they want to be. Not where we want them to be, but where they want to be. So there are three main types. So again, the focus is on that person. And that's the model that we use. So if you keep that stagecoach visual in your mind, that also helps keep the focus on that person. You're helping them move along to where they want to be.
So that the word for coach originally meant a means of conveyance. The word from French actually meant like a mode of transportation. That was the original meaning of the word for coach. So, yeah. We also, in your package, want to talk about the multiple roles that we play in supporting beginning teachers. And there's actually a chart in there that talks about these 4 support functions that we mentioned up here. Let's kind of work our way from the bottom up. Because in any conversation that you have with another person, it's like you've got 4 choices about the role or function that you need to play at this particular moment in time. And one of the capabilities of a coach is to choose the right role for the right time. Right? Now, many people who are working with beginning teachers don't have that bottom role of evaluator, but certainly administrators do have that role, that there is an accountability around the competency of beginning teachers. So, you know, for some people, when you're in that role of evaluator, there are certain behaviors that go along with that role that it's understood that part of your job is to make judgments and to give advice. And when it's clear that that is the nature of this relationship, then people are usually okay with that. Right? There's an understanding that that's the nature of the role. And so your behaviors, your language, you know, the kinds of things that you do align with the fact that that's the hat that you're wearing at that particular time. It's the role of evaluator or supervisor. Okay? Sometimes, and when we heard about the description of the full-time mentors this morning from our keynote speaker, sometimes the mentor is actually in the role of collaborator with the beginning teacher, where they actually have an opportunity to sit down, plan together, team teach together, gather student work, and assess student work together. That is the model of collaborators. Lots of times we say that we're collaborating when we're not actually. But for something to be a true collaboration, there needs to be equal stake or investment in the outcome of what it is that you're doing. Now, that's a wonderful option that they have with having people actually released from the classroom full time, that they actually have that option to work collaboratively with the beginning teacher. And when you're in that role, it is reciprocal. And the intention is that even as an experienced person, you have things to learn, and that you're open to suggestions and open to ideas from your colleague, and that you really are working in that mutually respectful and appreciative way when you're in that collaborative role. A lot of what we do with beginning teachers fits into that third role or function of consulting. And when you are, maybe you haven't thought of yourself as a consultant, but when you're giving advice, when you're making suggestions, that's actually what you're doing. You are an internal consultant who's giving advice or suggestions to another person. There's some presupposition that you have experience or expertise that the other person does not, that their repertoire is in some way limited. And so they're counting on you to kind of fill in the gap or to expand their repertoire. And certainly with beginning teachers, that is an important resource. They need access to consulting. The problem with that model is that if that's all you're doing, that creates a relationship of dependency. That does not build internal capacity. If the person is constantly having to come to you for advice or for suggestions, or even for approval, or for a little stamp on the head that says, you're doing great, you're doing well, great job, keep going. Even when you're doing that, whenever you're praising someone, you're actually in a consulting role. So in doing the training in cognitive coaching, what we're trying to do with the folks that we're working with is to add another option for them, that they have the option to try coaching rather than consulting, collaborating, or evaluating. So it's one more option that's there for them. Now, do you coach always? One of the caveats of coaching is that you cannot coach out of someone what is not there. And if you try to do that, you will not only frustrate yourself, but you will really frustrate the other person. If the well is dry, all right, don't keep putting the pail down there. And so, part of your, expertise as an experienced person is to figure out when you need to coach and when you need to consult, and not to confuse the two roles. It's around clarity of your role and function, and then your behavior has to be congruent with the role that you're in. So if I'm sitting in this chair and Penny thinks that I'm coaching her, and all of a sudden I start making judgments about what she's saying, and maybe not even verbally, maybe she just sees a look that comes across my face of skepticism about something that she's saying. Or shock. You're thinking of doing what? Yeah. Or that little, a lot of it is nonverbal. It doesn't even have to be, my saying, God, that's a stupid idea. You can tell, from someone's face. So, when I'm sitting in this chair as coach, I have to be monitoring my own behavior. Not only do I have to be watching what's happening with her, but I need to be highly conscious of my own behavior. And if I start, a little voice in my head starts saying, uh-oh, I'm not sure that this is a good, I have to be able to consciously turn that off in order to maintain congruence with the coaching role. So I can't say, Penny, that's a fabulous idea. I know the staff is going to go out of there energized and motivated to focus on her kids. It is not my role to give her evaluation or judgment or praise about what she is there to do. Penny will be the expert on her own choices and decisions that's there. So I can't do it. I think that's the toughest part for people when they want to move into that coaching role, is to let go of the cheerleader role of constantly praising people and saying, yeah, good job, great, when you're doing that, you're actually consulting, you're not coaching the other person. Okay? So I can't do that, and I also, when her hands are around my throat saying, tell me what to do, I can't do that. I can't give suggestions. My goal is to try to elicit what is there in her repertoire and help her to decide what to do. Okay? So what I'd like to buzz about for a minute is that thinking about those 4 roles or functions, and the folks that you're working with, where are you mostly now? Which of those functions predominates in your interactions with beginning teachers? Are you collaborating? Are you consulting? Are you evaluating? Are you coaching? Maybe you've been doing it, you didn't know. Okay. So what are you doing now?
Yeah. What we're hoping, as you think about those 4 roles that you play, is that you'll automatically go into your coaching role eventually, rather than the consulting role. But you really need to be clear about what your intention is. And as Denise said, sometimes you really do need to consult. One day, Denise and I were having a conversation about her son, and I was coaching her, and she stopped and she said, don't coach me. Just tell me what to do. Oh, okay.
And of course it worked.
And you'll find that with student teachers, the first thing, or beginning teachers, the first thing they want is, so how'd it go? If you watched a lesson, how'd I do? What did you think? And
Well, that's why I wanted to mention that I think to get to the coaching model, I don't think a brand new teacher, their first term or their first semester, their well is dry, and I think they want you to be much more valuable for them. But I think the new teacher will just say, no, I don't need anything for this myself. Tell me what to do.
Well, beginning teachers think that you all have a book that they don't have. And in that book are all the answers, and you big meanie, you won't share it with them. So they do come to you consistently. But there are opportunities with beginning teachers and with student teachers to coach. And a visual that I used to use with my students at Oise all the time was when they were planning a lesson, put yourself on a balcony overlooking your classroom. What are you doing? What are the students doing? What's on the wall? What's happening in that class? Just to get them to think about it. I didn't tell them what should be there. I wanted them to visualize it. And what strategies might you be using and stuff. So it does work in some situations, but there are times, but you need to be clear about that, and you need to be clear with them as well.
Even when you are giving advice, you can move towards more of a coaching model, even in giving advice or suggestions. Our mentor, John Dyer, always says, when you're giving people advice or suggestions, if you give them one suggestion, you're giving them a mandate. If you give them two suggestions, you've just created a dilemma for them. Now they're going to try and figure out which one you really meant. When you give people the third option or choice, and you say, so here's some options, which of these might work for you? Then you get back into the coaching model with people. So even if you're doing consulting, you can start to move. And again, you're supporting that efficacy, that ability, that self-concept, that self-directedness, and you're avoiding that dependency. And many of our folks who've had training in coaching after they've already started in some of those roles said they wish they had known that option was there right from the beginning, because they did create dependency, and then it was really tough to back off that. So they would have been, they wish they had known that that was an option right from the beginning in working with beginning folks.
It also prevents that, well, you told me to use that strategy,
and it didn't work.
You have enough monkeys on your back, you don't need any more. So what we'd like you to do now is turn to your back page with the reflection questions and think about question number 2. In what ways might skills in cognitive coaching contribute to your successes as a mentor? Thank you. Usually I listen for the volume to dip to know when to move on, but it's not dipping. One thing to keep in mind too about coaching is that even though your conversation has stopped, the thinking has not. So you don't have to bring closure to a coaching conversation. Even Denise and I, when we were coaching each other not long ago, Denise said to me the next day, I thought of a really good question I should have asked you yesterday. So even the coach continues to think. What we'd like you to do right now is to think about what you might know now that you didn't know at 10:30 when you came into the room about cognitive coaching, mentoring, and just quickly share that with your partner. If you're interested in learning more about cognitive coaching, I've put the website up here. It's just www.cognitivecoaching.com, and there are lots of articles there. There are links. There's research that you can explore further. So we hope you had at least one new thing to share with your partner, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.